very excited to see so many of you here. I'm honored and humbled to have such a distinguished panel here. So let me explain a bit how we'll proceed with the discussion. We'll start first of all with the role of the social networks, with the general assessment whether we are underestimating or overestimating the power of the social networks, because we know that there are like more than 7 billion people in the world, and only a little bit more than 1 billion people use social networks. There are 3 billion internet users, so we are talking about only, well, not a small, but still not the biggest half of the society in the world. The other block of the questions and the discussion would be assessing the role of the social networks and whether it enhances the opportunities for the youth, or whether it might be a certain risk or a threat to the youth. The other question might be whether the youth category exists in the world at all, in the social networks at all. Does it matter? And the last portion of questions would be related to the conflict areas or to the countries where the internet freedom is at risk. As many of you know, like there are countries where the internet freedom is severely restricted, and the report of Freedom House, the latest report, concludes that internet freedom around the world has declined for the 4th consecutive year, with a growing number of countries introducing censorship, surveillance, more aggressive becoming more aggressive towards bloggers and activists in the world. So there are challenges, there are risks, and I hope that we'll discuss about it. There are some countries which are close to us, as Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, but I hope that we're going to talk about other countries like Cuba, Burma, or like also the events in France, touching a little bit on the events in Lithuania as well. So I will introduce briefly the panelists. So Milda Darguzaite is an expert on investment and technology. I would call her also a global citizen of the global world, because she works in United States, used to work in United Kingdom, also in Lithuania. Then Andrius Tapinas, who is a prominent journalist in Lithuania, also a writer and very active person on social networks. Mykolas Katkus, I guess one of the best PR specialists in the country, the communication expert, and that is Tamauskas, last but not least, of course, the only representative, I guess, who would fit the category, to my understanding, the category of youth. He has been to well, and that's a question, we're gonna discuss. But also an active citizen. He has been to Ukraine for quite a while. He is also a member of the Global Shapers community. So we look forward to your comments. But let me start with Mykolas Katkus first. So, what's your take on the social networks? Are we underestimating or overestimating their power?
Well, yep.
Take all the mics. All the mics. All the mics. Here you go.
Mics. Thank you. 5 years ago, 15 years ago, when I started working in the communication sector in Lithuania, I've been reading a lot of the stuff about the communications discipline, and the scientists had a dream about the information society. You still remember that dream, right? There are still some worms in the textbook that there will be a time when the information society will conquer the world, and everybody will be free to communicate whatever it wants, whoever it wants, and and then the true democracy will be enabled. Everybody will be able to immediately express their thoughts, not just in the opinion polls. So now, guess what we have? It's called Facebook. It's information society. Everybody can, in a click, taste it and take it. And of course, it comes with a certain, of course, I would say that partially, in many ways, this dream has come through, and people have never wrote so much, people have never photographed so much, people have never had so many ways how to express themselves, and the traditional power structures like the newspapers, the TVs, the old guys in a smoky room, who basically earlier ruled the world, white people, now they are disrupted because people everywhere can express their opinions, and if you are funny, if you're smart, if you have more wits, more guts to do, you can disrupt the things, and your idea can conquer the world. So this is all the right stuff. But being a communication person, I always think how it works actually, and these theorists, these information dream, society theorists, information society theorists, they had this idea about the fact that currently a lot of things are being passive. That means that people have their ideas, and their problems by which they can identify themselves each to another, but these things are hidden beneath because they have no way. It's very difficult to connect. When Andrius Tapinas wanted to play a game in 1991 as a science fiction game, I think you wrote an ad in a newspaper.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So if you wanted to play a game and find a person who wants to play a game, you have to write a newspaper ad, and someone responded to you after like 3 years or 3 months, and said, "Oh yeah, I want to play that game too." With a lot of grammatical mistakes. That wasn't me at the time, but anyway.
Yeah, but I received the 10 letters in my mailbox, not email box, but mailbox.
Mailbox. So that's easy now. Now you go to any blog space, science fiction, play game anybody, and everybody can immediately answer you. But the thing is that it's not only about games. It's also about more serious problems. It's also about people's things that people need, and the society which was earlier ruled by some great narrative, great idea, that this is Lithuania or not so great ideas, the Soviet Union, with all these great ideas, now they are fractured in a small narrative, small stories, small ideas which people have, and that's the fantastic thing, and also dangerous thing, what Facebook or Twitter does is that you can identify with these people, and you can make this group. For example, I know, like Milda Darguzaite is an outspoken person talking about the women's rights. So especially the situation of the women's discrimination of women in the Lithuanian society. So you can, and there are a lot of women identifying with her on that. On your Facebook page. That means that you can become a spokesperson. You can find the topics which are important, and you can make these topics active. But with all this fantastic thing that people can actually now find other people with whom they can express feelings, and with whom they can fight for their rights and disrupt all these smoky rooms. At the same time, there comes another problem that wackos and people who have not so nice we don't want to play games, but we want to shoot somebody. They found a way too, and the whole this global narrative, a lot of things which were earlier hidden, or they never fell through the sensors of society, the pillars of society, because journalists filter a lot of information which coming around. A lot of these things can very easily identify too, and therefore this is a double-crossed sword. At one point, it's very nice that we have all these ideas, and there's really a lot of power. And in Lithuania, particularly, we feel it very much because the press has the circulation of press has fallen dramatically in Lithuania after the crisis, and we are having an advent of social networks much faster than it happened in some other countries. But at the same time, we're also feeling that sometimes this disappearance of the great ideas, it comes up to the small warring groups waging war against each other. So that's a thing to elaborate on, and I hope that the other speakers will do that too.
Thank you very much. The question to Andrius Tapinas, I guess, as he was mentioned a few times, the question is, so I see that people here have like iPads or smartphones, and I have the old-fashioned thing, just notes. So the question is, if I'm not connected to the internet, if I'm not using the social networks, because I've noticed that many of you have like thousands of followers on your Twitter or Facebook accounts, and I guess I have like 100. So should I be
That's a problem.
embarrassed?
But it will increase.
But maybe, yeah, maybe. But should I be embarrassed? The other question is, or perhaps there are people who are not using social networks at all. So are they not part of the society? Can they be influential if they are not in the social networks?
Thank you for inviting me here at first. And I think it's a very interesting question, because I see a lot of trends generating in social media around the world and in Lithuania. And if I can elaborate a little bit on the first part about the dangers and the possibilities of the social media. So I have a comparison for you, and how many here in the hall are the fans of the movie franchise Star Wars? Yeah, okay, quite a few hands. Okay, so yeah, the question is, what is Force in Star Wars? Is it good or is it bad? Right? If you are a Jedi, is one hand. If you are a Sith Emperor or Sith Lord, is the other hand. And also, even the masters of the Force, they don't understand how it works really, except maybe a Yoda and few other strange guys. And then they also say that, experience hard it is and so on. So I think the same comparisons we can do with the social media. That even the people who are so-called gurus of social media, they have hard time to understand how it works, how it really works. Why one post and one person can generate thousands of so-called social media likes, social media currency in likes and shares, and the other one, who is maybe much smarter, much more sophisticated, he stews in his own kettle without breaching the walls of ignorance and let's say indifference. And now another trend is that I see when some very clever, very I would say respectful people, they feel even proud saying, I don't have a Facebook profile, I don't have a Twitter account, I don't care. Well, what is it? I'm not playing these games, these are sandbox games. Well, that's okay, that's good, that's their right to say so, even if they do it in self-promotion for some reason, if they see it. But it's the same thing as to say, I still have my Nokia 3310 and I'm cool with that because it holds the battery holds for a really long time, and I can drop it really hard on the floor, and it's really better than iPhone 6 or Samsung 5. And this is what happens if we hold to the idea that important things for us are brick and mortar. Important things for us are our telephones not breaking when you throw them on a floor. This is the zone that you stick yourself to. The current world says that there is a phenomena, and the phenomena will stick for at least more 5-6 years. All the leading analysts on media say that we do not expect another breakthrough in communications like it was with Facebook and social media even in a decade.
Oculus Rift, anybody?
Sorry?
Oculus Rift.
Yeah, Oculus Rift, Google Glass, and so on. Yeah. Of course, it's but the main, the shift changing communication. Of course, the experts know nothing, and maybe in 6 months we'll have that breakthrough. But we still are learning about the force which is called the social media, because it's so sophisticated, it's so hard to understand, and it's so many faceted. I mean, we have in Lithuania, and I'm pretty sure that in all the countries, let's compare we have two totally different societies on social media, as we call it, adult society, and for example, a teen society. And if you manage to enter the teen society, which is quite a hard thing for adults to do, because they keep quite strict rules on taking the adults in their society, you'll see that completely different picture, completely different authorities, completely different rules, completely different trends, things, and so on that we don't even know about. And this is another thing that really fascinates me. And also the older people who don't have Facebook, I think they are losing a lot. They are losing a lot, and I see that they are trying to enter the frame, and it's extremely hard for them to do, because I started my networking in 2009, and with a very clear understanding that this is really hard work that I'm gonna do to build up the base for spreading my ideas, for promoting my products, for getting an audience to laugh at my jokes, and so on and so on, because all these things work. So then if you enter the stage just now and you expect that, yeah, everybody does that, it's so easy, I'm a politician and I'll have like 50,000 followers, right, like a snap, or it's impossible. I mean, and the rules are very strict, and the rules of social media are very unforgiving. Extremely unforgiving. Just do one faux pas and you'll see how it goes. And it usually ends in a really bad way for the people who don't uphold the rules of social media. So, and what was your question? Oh yeah, hi, I'm Anders Happiness. Okay, thanks.
Good, thanks. Milda Darguzaite, and her introductory remarks. Mykolas Katkus already mentioned that you are also dealing with the gender-related issues, and the question is, sometimes I feel that some of the very active people in the social networks, they are trying to mainstream some of the issues, but they also kind of live in their own illusionary world bubble. You know, they would say something, get, I don't know, let's say 100 or 200 likes, you know, and they say, oh, this is popular, right? But again, there are a lot of women living without internet, you know, and how do you feel about that? Like, are we living sometimes in this illusionary world of the social networks?
I believe that I write about women's issues, but that's probably maybe 3% of what I write. Maybe just to give a little bit of background, I'm actually a very late adopter of social media. Believe it or not, a little bit more than a year ago, I didn't have a public profile. I only had like very close friends, and it was a great thing for me because my friends are all over the world, so you don't have to write emails to them, and you kind of know what they're doing. The reason why I got on social network was actually because of Tapinas, and I don't know if he knows that.
Well done.
But I don't know if some of you know, but during the time when I was working at Invest Lithuania, and there was a talk of merging the two agencies, Invest Lithuania and Enterprise Lithuania, we were very concerned. I personally didn't want this to happen, and so I saw that the only way to do it is through public attention. I had no intention of doing it myself. So the first thing that we did is we actually called all the journalists to draw the attention to the issue, and the answer we were getting was, we are observing what's happening. When we think it's worth it, we're gonna write about it. So then somebody whom I know actually contacted one of the journalists who agreed to write an article about it. And he wrote an article about it, and I woke up one morning, and I used to check my Facebook maybe once a week or something, and I opened my Facebook and I see there are like 10 friend requests from the people I don't know. And so I didn't understand what happened, and a little bit later somebody mentioned that a person named Tapinas reposted that article, and that article is now generating attention and everybody's reading it. The article was actually printed in, not in the main newspaper, it was not printed on the front page, but because somebody reposted it, it actually drew attention. So for me that day, I talked to a lot of people because it was really outside my comfort zone to become a public person, believe it or not. I said, if I'm gonna do this, this is the time, because by the end of the day, I already had 100 friend requests, 150 friend requests, and so I did it. Before I went and deleted all my personal photos so that people don't see it. There was not much to see anyway because I was not very active. But I got on social media because I actually had an issue to address. And the reason why I did it is because I told myself I do not want to do this again if we have an issue, because I didn't see that problem is going to go away anytime soon. that I'm not dependent on the journalists who will tell me, we'll decide whether it's an important issue or not. And so my original idea was that if I write something, then I can at least call Tapinas and ask him, maybe he can repost it again. That was my idea. That was my idea. And what I noticed is actually that people started following. And so I was learning as I was doing, and I'm still learning. It's still, been a little bit over a year. Given, how many followers I have, I think I've been quite successful without trying. And what I want to say without trying is that every post that I write, it's not about generating likes or generating followers. For me, it's about what I think that people should hear from me. And then if you don't like it, and there are some times when I know I'm going to write this and the number of followers is going to increase and decrease. And sure enough, they decrease. And for me, it seems, I say to myself, that means that, we don't fit together. So that's good, because what I want is actually people who are like-minded. And like-minded not for them to sort of adore what I say or whatever, but I want to sort of say that you are not the only one who thinks about it. And I am not the only one who thinks about it. It generates discussion. I actually noticed, I've been noticing how the comments have been changing below my posts. In the beginning, I remember very clearly when I posted the first time about women's rights, the comments were extremely offensive. They were, most of them, for the most part, were really not appropriate. Now, it's actually if somebody comes, even the ones that I remember were posting offensive comments, they at least try to be more argumentative, So it's sort of, I feel like, okay, maybe I'm achieving something. So my sort of purpose of the whole social media is to talk about issues and that I think should be heard, that the media, in my view, and that's my opinion, it's my Facebook, is not addressing as much as they should. And that's why for me social media is absolutely a good thing because it brings democracy to everybody. Everybody now everybody has a voice. Everybody can express what they want. For me, actually, what I notice also is that now if the article is being printed in a third page on a newspaper, well, if we make it on social media popular, everybody's going to see it. And now it's another issue, is actually who is deciding what people are going to see. It's not editors of newspapers anymore, it's actually social media. And it's not only we who press the likes, but it's also the algorithms, the people that write algorithms, who decide which articles are going to appear on your newsfeed and what you're going to see. Whether it's going to be Tapinas talking about his jokes, or whether it's going to be me talking about women's issues, right? So it's all algorithm driven, and it's creating also other issues, which are up for discussion because it's something completely new that's come up only recently, exactly how that democracy really works. But for me, it's definitely only a positive thing.
Thank you very much. So let me go to Darius Tamauskas, asking more specific question about the role of youth or the role of internet for youth. Milda Darguzaite mentioned that there's a correlation between democracy and internet freedom and social networks. So the question to you, as you've been to Ukraine, do you think that it's valid? If you are like a person living, I don't know, in some distant region in Ukraine without the internet penetration, without laptop, how does that affect? I mean, does it affect at all the social networks, your life? Please, Darius.
Good morning, everyone. Before to start, probably I should mention that we should all go from the stage and we should all invite Monica because she is the one who actually knows what the social media really is and how to use it to promote her own ideas, And I don't have any number of followers or whatsoever, but after visiting Ukraine, which I did from September till December last year, I've witnessed quite a few phenomenons or events that are continuing up until now. which are quite extraordinary in a way that how quickly a simple message spread out by a single person can move on around the whole country of 1,000 kilometers. For example, the Maidan itself was the event ignited by a guy called, well, at least that's the official theory, by my guy called Mustafa, who is actually an Afghan-born Ukrainian, who was very popular journalist and activist in Ukraine. And he basically posted a Facebook message in 2 sentences saying, okay, enough is enough. If I get 1,000 likes under my comment over here, we are gathering tonight at 10 p.m. at the square, and we'll see where we go from there. And half an hour later, people started gathering after 1,000 likes. And this is how the Maidan started, officially. In Ukraine, right now, during a moment of crisis, I probably should go back to events in Paris, if you don't mind, guys. All of us know what happened in Paris a few weeks ago. And Ukrainians, they copied the same message, using the term, instead of Charlie, using the term of city where the bus was blown up, Volvokhana, Jesus Volvokhana. Basically trying to gather attention of Europe itself, saying, look, we have 70 people died over there and all the world knows about it, that's fine. We have daily 10 or 15 people dying over here, and you know, this is Europe, this is the terrorism again, and no one seems to really bother to know about it. And there was a march of peace in Kiev with president and some officials walking the same way as we did in Paris. Yet this gathered really little attention. So my probably comment would be here: you can ignite something big if you touch the hearts and souls of people, even if you're no namer, because that's how the main the largest initiatives started in Ukraine. I have a few more examples. I probably will come back to them during our further discussion.
Thank you very much. The issue that Mustafa Nayyom was definitely quite a known journalist already, but nonetheless, I think that social networks are important, of course, expressing the solidarity. But one of the concerns I have, like how much influence do social networks have for the offline activities? And perhaps I would give that question to Mykolas Katkus. He remembers, I bet, one of the largest non-violent actions in the world, I would claim, the Baltic Way, in 1987. We didn't have any social networks. And would it be possible to have that kind of action, like, with the help of social networks today?
Well, you're not right. We did not have social networks. We didn't have good technology, but we had social networks. I mean, this newspaper ad, Andrius had is also a social network, and you know, people gathering. And actually, one Lithuanian politologist, Ainė Ramonaitė, has done a terrific research about the social networks before the social networks, and she basically claims that the whole Sąjūdis movement, which you know was one of the most prominent movements which destroyed the Soviet Union and you know gave a claim, helped Lithuania claim independence, was actually a result of social network. You know, it was several social networks. One social network was the Greens, people who are fighting for ecology, and the second social network were the people who were gathering all the old songs. You know, and these both social networks collided and formed a huge movement, which resulted in thousands of people marching non-violently, protesting against the bad things which the Soviet Union was doing at the time. So it was the social network. Of course, currently the social networks are just making you do it much in a much easier way, and of course this technology is terrific. And when you talk about the things going from online to offline, it's probably two things I would like to talk about. One thing is about the fact that you still need to, like with old media, in the new media, you still need to understand that people plug in the TV or tuned into the Facebook, not in search of higher meaning of life, or spiritual things. But first of all, they search for entertainment. A majority of people search for entertainment, and this majority of people who search for entertainment, and probably Milda is right by filtering these people who don't listen to what she wants to say, because it's usually the small groups of people, really small groups of people, like 100, 200, 1,000 people are making the big change. It's not the whole majority of people. When something is happening, the majority of people will follow, because a person cannot take attention into anything. So there needs to be a spark, like we say, a journalist, a well-known journalist with a social media profile. It needs to be a spark. Someone starts talking about the discrimination practices against women in Lithuania, and actually shaped the debate, because after some time everybody is afraid that he can get ridiculed by Milda, and he's not he's afraid to tell that at some point, or some this is the way the idea spread. But the thing is that expanding the horizon of the debate is one of the best things which social media technologies can actually do. But again, I would like to say that these social networks themselves, it's a relationship between human, and there is still a lot of human potential into that. No technology can no algorithm can pair to people who are not very much like-minded. You want to interrupt me? Okay.
Yeah, well, okay, so let me challenge you on that. I would certainly agree that social networks do expand the horizon, but I wonder how many of the youth here are following the things like the events in Nigeria, Syria, Palestine, and if I want to make it meaningful or viral, what could you suggest, how to make them be interested in things like that, not in some local Lithuanian issue?
Well, now there's the hard scientific fact. Why people are checking the status on the Facebook accounts? It's because it was been tested on mice. It's called the random satisfaction. When you are checking your Facebook status, and people who are Facebook junkies like me and probably Andrus and the rest of it, they're checking their Facebook status each, first thing in the morning. First thing you do, check your Facebook status. This is called random satisfaction. If a mouse is clicking something and getting a satisfaction immediately, that means that she will not be clicking as much. But if she's clicking and sometimes getting the satisfaction, sometimes not, that means she will be clicking and clicking and clicking. So this is one very important thing, and this is why that people are using it. First idea is entertainment, and therefore the topics which you do needs to be connected to the audience in that way. But what is a terrific thing about the social networks, that both in Twitter and in Facebook, among these kittens, among these family pictures, along these cute little children dancing, or some people, or some elderly people putting themselves a bucket of water on their heads, you still find something interesting, and it's probably more interesting things than you can find on any news portal. So in terms of challenging, the only thing, if you need to do something across, you need a good idea, and there is technologies already in place.
And I would add that even if it's social media, it doesn't mean that the rules have changed. So before, if you want to have an audience for people to watch your show or to read your article, you have to write it in a way that it would be interesting for people to read it. And Tapinas probably is one of those people who knows very well, how to write it so that it's entertaining and it has puts the message across and so on. And somebody else who is trying to say exactly the same thing, but will say it in a boring way, and he or she will not have any followers or any people who will read that same article. So I think those types of rules in the social media are exactly the same communication rules, right? The good thing about it is that because before, whatever we know about the world is what the TV is showing for us, or what the newspapers are writing for us. Now, actually, if you want your issue to be heard, and we are, let's say, a small country, or Ukraine is a relatively small country, there was this one girl, right, that she, like in Ukraine, there was a photo that was sort of going viral all over the world until New York Times notices it and puts it on the first page. The same thing in Nigeria, where the girls were kidnapped. Bring back our girls, that was the Twitter hashtag. You know, girls get kidnapped every day all over the world. Somebody in Nigeria made it into an issue that just went viral. So what it means is that all these activists, need to know how to communicate to be able to compete with all the other news that goes on every day, and that way you can be heard. So I think, it's not that everything gets hidden in the noise, but actually now there's more competition in communication, but actually more opportunity to be heard.
And if I can add also on what Milda said and on your point about Palestine or Nigeria or any other faraway countries from Lithuania or for that matter from any European country, as Milda said, the rules for social media and for media are as well. And the rule number one, which stands for every media, I think for 100 years, that our own backyard news are much more important to us than what's going on. That's why the foreign policy news are always on the backpedaling, on the second front, and only very specialty journals, national journals or national media specializes in foreign news, because and it's not a Lithuanian problem, it's not a Latvian, it's even more expressed in the United States, who are so big and so powerful. They don't need to care about outside world. The average viewer. They are happy to. They don't even care about what's going on in a next state, because the states are so big. So basically, that's why it's very hard for Lithuanian people to relate to Nigerian events or Palestine events, especially if you don't know exactly who's right or who's wrong, as in Palestine Israeli case. There are a lot of, and you are not very much into it. So you need either viral or you need a just cause to believe and to take interest. Why we are taking interest in Ukraine? Because our country has a very strong stance, our media has a very strong stance. The interest is very high. It's our neighbors. Again, it's a neighboring country. We have lived through the same thing as Ukrainian lived in 25 years ago. That's why we relate. That's why the whole social media relates. And it's really harder to do it on African issues or Middle East issues.
I actually not completely, but disagree with most of the points just made. Probably that's because I'm the youngest one, less experienced, so I can do mistakes. A few points. Talking about Nigeria, right? First of all, I'd like to say that we are the country of the clicks, and our media is especially the country of the clicks. The thing about Nigeria, 2,000 people massacred a few weeks ago, and the week at the same time as in events in Paris, there was no headline in any, and I'm talking about not top like Delphi or any media online about the events, at least stating the fact that this happened. And I have quite a few, because I studied in UK, I have quite a few Nigerian friends, and I've seen them posting this on Facebook, and I've seen the number, because I'm using Twitter. By the way, how many people here are using Twitter? Okay. I'm using Twitter, and I've seen the trending messages about Nigeria on Twitter. And at that time, actually, if you enter something like Nigeria, the suggested search word for you would be Nigeria, no one cares. That's a trending search word, the hashtag used by Nigerians themselves to spread the message about, hey guys, yeah, events in Paris, fine. We have, 100 times more people died here at the same time. No one cares. And I posted actually a few English paragraphs message on my Facebook, and I've got over 100 shares from people I don't know, they're not my friends, and most of them are from, judging by the language used in the share posts, they're from Africa or Middle East, and I've seen a few shares from Lithuanian people over here saying, I haven't heard about it. And I think what actually helped to spread the message is a provocative question at the very end, saying, what if the 2,000 dead Nigerians were actually white? because that's the most common thing in reshares. Because is that the reason why no one really knows about it? Because we're just black people over there in Africa, and that's a normal stuff. You know, that's somewhere far away. Talking about Ukraine and why we like Ukraine, because we have historical ties. I totally agree on that point. But I think again there is a certain clicks interest in here, because it's very useful nowadays to like and support Ukraine via Facebook, via blue and yellow shots in nightclub, via creating square names or posting a picture saying something like "I support Ukraine," while at the same time we have a number of Lithuanians actually supporting Ukraine and doing something over there on the ground, and I know quite a few of them. They're just not public people, and we don't have Facebook profiles or we don't really care about posting these kind of things. They actually care, and they are very pesky and supporting the guys up until last week in the Donetsk airport. So I think there is a certain balance between supporting, and this is because why we really support, and the officials really support, and on the other side use political points, as I say.
Thank you. So I agree to some points, but let me ask the question now directly concerning the conflict areas of the regime countries. I guess many of you have heard the Arab Spring, right? And as if that was caused by the social networks. I guess some of you might have heard the Twitter revolution in Iran and in Moldova in 2009. There was a revolution which failed. It was called Revolution Through Social Networks in Belarus in 2011, and it is a neighboring country. I wonder how many of the people here have heard about that. So, you know, to some extent, there was a boom saying that, well, that's the change that social networks could bring. On the other hand, there were people saying that it is just a fetishism of technology, the same role as telegraph might have had in the Bolshevik Revolution or the tape recorder in the Iranian Revolution in '79. So, you know, that's the question. To my understanding, usually social networks are only a tool and an instrument for spreading the message out, but actually the key issue is getting people offline. And one friend of mine who was training the activists in Egypt, he said that the key moment was when, like, the internet was shut down. Those people who were looking at their smartphones and looking to what is happening on the square, they got disconnected, and that's what triggered them to go offline, to go to the square and to actually protest. But so that's the question. The connection between offline and online, because it's very easy to be active online saying, for example, Lukashenko is a bastard, or Lukashenko is a dictator, and pretend to be a revolutionary person, but it's much more dangerous to go out to the street and boycott, protest, and things like that. So, Mykolas, perhaps you...
Yeah, I would like to say that time frame here is very important. If you look at the advent of social networks, 2009, 2010, you know, in 2011 we have revolutions both in Arab Spring, and we also have the first revolutions led by Navalny, first protest led by Navalny in Moscow, which were extremely powerful, and we also had, also don't forget it, we also had Islamic and black youth going out to the streets of Paris and France and burning the cars. So we also had at the same, more or less at the same time frame. And I would say that at that time, you know, and I would say that the dictatorships, which usually, you know, rule, especially dying dictatorships like the Arab dictatorships, like old dictatorships, they are usually ruled by suppressing the information. And when there was a way not to suppress information, you know, these old regimes did not find a way how to deal with them. But what happened later on, and what already happened, also happened in the revolution on the social networks in Belarus, and what later on happened in Kazakhstan, and also now we see it happening in Moscow, was that the regime found a way how to counter it. With fake messages, with implants, with spreading the narratives which are completely different. And I would even say that currently, for example, Russia's regime is probably the expert on faking the political agenda in the social networks. So there was a time frame when this new disruptive technology had a disruption in ways how the political movements work. But currently, of course, they have to spend more money on hiring old ladies to post on Twitter, on Facebook, something which is there. But at the same time, this thing is there. Now, about the other question you raised, that everybody can be brave on social networks and everybody can be charitable on social networks, but not everybody comes out. I think that this sort of question is important. But it's not about technology. It's about each person. There are a lot of people who say, "Oh man, do you see how cool they go out and these flags? No man, I totally kind of support them. This is one way to say it. Second way is to go out and do something. But it doesn't means that it doesn't mean that the social networks are somehow blamed for that. There were people who were always saying, "Oh dude, you go out there," but no, I just kind of I chill out. So there were always things like this, and I think that just a social network is a way to express your narcissism extremely well and to construct your identity the way you want to see it. People are narcissists and people are constructing their identities with all these shots. That doesn't mean that they are bad people. Everybody's popular with this yellow and blue flags. So why not put one on my page? That means I'm cool, man. Or like put a small sign.
Good. Yeah, go on. Continuing with the Russian topic, for example, a few of you who know Navalny, for example, his court hearing about the sentencing of him was supposed to be on January 15th, and a few weeks before that, the initiative started on Kontakte, which is an alternative on Facebook, and Facebook itself, inviting people to come to the Manezhne Square to protest the possible jailing of Alexei Navalny. And the government was so afraid that this is going to be a huge thing. They actually announced his court hearing the next day over the phone to himself, saying that you have to come to the court next day and you'll hear what we've decided. And the same evening, only a few thousand, I think, or so, or very little numbers came to the square, and basically the protest failed. So this is, I think, a great example of how the government is actually afraid, but at the same time is really using the tools how to control the social media in Russia in terms of going against it, not just shutting it down, but actually going against it. Because again, following the events in Ukraine, if you go on Twitter, you can see on an hour basis some message that is being posted from accounts that have English names, and the message is repeated by like 50 times, written in Cyrillics in Russian, and some really random messages saying like blah blah blah, number of Ukrainians killed over there and victory is ours. And basically, and this is being reposted by the Westerners who actually have a true normal accounts, who are actually following the events and they believe what is told there. And another example of controlling of the media and is the thing in Russia that actually the bloggers are recognized as a part of media, and they have to register if they have a certain number of followers, like 3,000 or so. And everything they post is being monitored, and if you're not following the guidelines, you'll have a visit.
And I would say some of the effects are probably not necessarily as visible. So the ones that the most visible are the revolutions, but those don't happen every day. But there are many other things that people sort of get out of it, like for example, putting pressure on your politicians to pay attention to certain issues. So the fact, for example, that in Lithuania we had such a huge support for Ukraine, maybe or maybe not translated to higher levels where, it's one of the priority issues for Lithuania. or even the fact that in Lithuania it became popular, then it sort of spread around, and you still read about Ukraine on front pages of world newspapers. So I think definitely the social media sort of helps. The newspapers then reflect of what people want to see to some extent, and I think the fact that even about Nigeria, 2 days later it was on the first pages of the newspaper because people from social media were pressuring to do it. On the other hand, actually there are a lot of negatives to that, and I, for example, learned certain things about social networks that I didn't know about, and I don't use it. That ISIS uses. Apparently ISIS, the extremist Islamic Republic, they are really, really good at using social networking to spread propaganda and to recruit people. So, for example, they post photos and they spread them to all around the world, and they have an army of people that repost it, retwitter, and apparently, most of the time, if you, for example, go and search for a word like Baghdad, the first image on Twitter that would come up would be an ISIS picture, because they're working on it. They want this to appear in the front. So as much as the social media can do some good, it can do a lot of damage. And again, what I was mentioning before is that we have completely new rules now. What is supposed to be allowed, what is free word versus, not free word, what should be banned, and so on. But in general, I think everybody who wants to make a change has to learn those rules of communication, right? And that's what Darius did with his post about Nigeria, right? One sentence you said that you think made a difference. But I think it was the whole message.
Actually, on ISIS, one said it on Monday discussion we had on education and online education and the use of online tools. Actually, Davos itself speaker said that we should actually learn from what ISIS is doing on social media.
Yeah.
So,
if I can also, I'll just add just
sure.
a short remark on a short remark on what's been said. I think the important thing is for us to understand the balance of power between free medias, the traditional media, which let's say is TV, the news media, online media, and the social media. And for example, when you talk about Russia, the balance of power is completely different from that is in Lithuania or in, say, US or in Poland. In Russia, I'd say the power of TV is like maybe 90% or something like that. And you can do anything you want on Twitter, on Facebook, but you don't have the power because federal TV channels just blanks out everything that you are doing. And Lithuania, for example, I would say we see a major trends. And I see the major trend that the social media becomes a citizenship media. And I'm not sure whether it's really a good thing, because the news media are starting to following blindly. And the more we see that the post on Facebook can become a full-fledged article without even just doing a single piece of research or adding up. And in my favorite TV series, which was shown on HBO about the journalism called The Newsroom, in the final series, the news head, the main hero, he just said that okay, we have a citizen media. It's not a public media; it's a citizen media. So, how long does it take for us to get back to the lynching times and the times of Ku Klux Klan if we give all the power to the citizen media, who actually sometimes acts like a monkey with a grenade without understanding the power it has in its hands.
And that's a very interesting topic you raised about. What is going now? The objective media. It started because of the advertising market back in end of the 19th century, when the advertising market wanted to sell the soap to everybody, and therefore the newspapers and magazines started to become less partisan. So basically, they became, they wanted to sell soap both for Democrats and both for Republicans and both for Jewish and both for Irish people. So they wanted to create a universal media, and based on that, the whole objectivity, the science of media science was built. The problem is that currently with the citizen media and with the idea ways how to reach just your own audience, we're coming back to the times when the media was extremely subjective. If you take United States, even television, the hard media like Fox, and MSNBC, lives in totally different worlds. it's like two different Americas, and this subjectivity is a new way to go. And for example, a person who follows ISIS and ISIS channels and watches other TVs, he lives in ISIS world, and he thinks that everything in this world is okay, and he can justify a lot of other things. And this is also what raises an issue, is how to break through these clusters of a person living in his own bubble, and in this bubble he can make a lot of wrong choices, by not hearing anybody else.
As we are getting to the second part of our discussion, let me encourage the audience to raise questions. Just raise your hand. We have a mic here, so you are able to ask a question or to give a brief commentary. But let me follow up on the some effects of the social media. Definitely I see a value in it, especially in the regime countries where traditional media could be challenged. I guess some of you have seen the excellent documentary about called Burma VJ, reporting from a closed country. That was related to the Saffron Revolution in 2007. Burma, or Myanmar, is a very closed country, and nobody had information what is happening on the ground. And some youth activists were just taping everything, recording all the stuff, and transmitting that to Europe or to the Western world. And that's how BBC, CNN, and other media platforms could receive an actual information what is happening on the ground. The other example, which would be very interesting, the country I would claim with the most oppressive legislation and basically no internet in the country, has the well-known or the most known blogger in the world. I don't know how many of you know Ioani Sanchez. Does anybody know? Of course, she writes in Spanish. And that's also a question about our ignorance. She was nominated as the most influential person. She was in the top 100 of the most influential people in the world by Times in 2008, and she's a blogger from Cuba. She has her blog Desde Cuba, then Generación Y, and actually her blog is translated into 25 languages, including Lithuanian, actually. So check that out. And that's a blogger coming from a country without internet, I would say. So it creates opportunities, a lot of opportunities, and we have talked about some of the challenges in Russia. Actually, many of you know, I guess, that one of the biggest social networks, VKontakte, the creator of that, the founder of that network, Pavel Durov, left the country, right, and he left the company just because Russian authorities, Kremlin, was trying to take over it, and this is an increasing phenomenon. We have alternative networks in China, right, with millions of people on the ground, and where authorities can actually manipulate the moods in the society. And actually, yesterday in Davos, or the day before yesterday, there was another remark that we are becoming the surveillance state because of the internet, and that's a challenge not only to the non-democratic countries but also to the democratic countries. So that's gonna be the other question about the risks and threats in the internet to the entire panel. But I saw the raised hand, so a question from the audience.
Good morning. It says on.
Wait for the green light.
Okay, the green line is on. Good morning. Thank you for interesting discussion. I think all of us more or less agree upon the power of the social network, upon the power of the messages it spreads. Right now, it has immense speed, it has immense power. However, we have those examples. We touched them: Arab Spring, Twitter revolution, when some in use of social networks started these movements, right? Which we think were the positive influence, right? We started a movement in order to gain democracy and so on. However, now we see those countries are more or less in chaos, right? Or let's take Egypt. We took down Mubarak, but now we have the dictatorship staying there. And one thing is, I just want to raise this topic in the cloud. One thing is to start this movement, to ask people to get their emotions, to ask people to go out of the streets and fight for their rights. However, what's next? What's the second step? And who's responsible for actually making the second step on how we will manage when we will have this goal of chaos reached, right? So this would be one point. For me, I will later have another one as well.
So the question of sustainability of the change.
I'm probably understand with here that the movement started. And it turned out in some cases not really in a very well way, right? So, but you probably should ask yourself a question. Okay, imagine a situation where in US someone starts tweeting and the message goes viral. Let's take over, US and make it a whatever state. This kind of movement, I'm not sure, but it will probably fail because there is no inside need for the people to actually do something like this. So my comment would be that Twitter, it's not like it started the movement, but it was a tool to help start the movement. The people inside probably had this need to probably express themselves, and Twitter just basically helped to spread out the message. That's my take on this.
Okay, then the follow-up question. It's not about. I'm not saying that it's bad to start those movements, but who's responsible then for the second step of actually making everything right? I mean, when we're thinking about making this move, are we thinking about the possible consequences, the negative consequences? I agree that if the initiative it's not positive, like your example with the US, it won't run out, but in those type of areas. Now I'm starting a movement. Maybe it has to have some pre-programmed, I don't know, agenda of how we will use to start and then to make certain steps in order to sustain this order.
Thank you. That's a question usually raised by the dictators in all the regime countries saying, honestly, it is like, for instance, our neighboring country, Lukashenko, he's emphasizing all the time the stability. Say, people, don't this
А потом что? А что кормить вас будет? Откуда-то? Ну, ребята, смотрите, вот Украина, вот какой бардак теперь.
And he's actually showing the Maidan, the Maidan as the example where you see the people showed their discontent, the protest led to the crisis, to the catastrophe, to the war. And Belarusians would be saying, we are like approaching 2015, we are in 2015, and there's gonna be another presidential elections. I would assume a fake presidential election in Belarus. And Lukashenko would be saying just the same. Guys, stick to me, I'm the guarantee of the stability. I know that's a question, of course, to ask for all the activists, like, how would you sustain the energy? Because in Belarus, you've seen in 2006, the Jeans Revolution, which gathered like 20,000 people at the square, but the leaders, the opposition, was not ready. They said, go home. Plus, there were oppression. In 2010, there was a revolution, or like the first day, you had somewhat like a couple of thousand people, and there was a huge, massive oppression. The people were dispersed. Like nine presidential candidates were arrested. Like 700 people were arrested or so. And immediately after that, the Belarusian authorities started toughening the legislation, basically putting the entire civil society underground. So the regime countries do not want civil society to be active. And the internet was basically one of the very few oases, or like small oases for the civil society to be active. And the same is happening in Russia now, because like we see what is happening with the social networks. The information war is happening not only in Russia, Ukraine. It's happening in the Baltic states, in Europe generally, and that's a challenge, a threat that we were speaking about. That internet and social networks, they are also a threat to the activists. For instance, if you are an activist, a real activist on the ground, would you be there on Facebook, on Twitter? Would you reveal your identity? Because that's the easiest way. Like if I'm infiltrated in the network, I would see the entire organization behind that, and that's a challenge. So, any other remarks?
A few comments. You mentioned responsibility, right? When you're starting something like this, when you start spreading a message, I don't think a single person who actually does that really believes that this is go global, viral, and this will change our country. And the last thing he thinks about is, will I be responsible for the consequences of what I'm writing here in these 2 sentences? And my next word is about Mustafa, I previously mentioned the Ukrainian guy who actually ignited the Maidan movement. That post he started still gets comments on a daily basis where people are asking him, do you feel responsible for what you started? Because basically, if you follow the chain of events, your invitation to go to Maidan and drink tea that evening led to the current war and loss of Crimea, blah blah blah. And he says no, because I started the drinking session that evening and gathering of people. I'm not responsible for the war in my country, and I don't think anyone who is doing something like this feels responsibility. And a comment on Russia, if you have a good message and you spread it via Twitter or Facebook or Contact, and this goes around Russian people and reaches their mind, they still don't go to the streets. That's probably the answer, because the Russians are not yet ready for that. You have a message, you have a communication tool to deliver it to them. And for example, the gathering at Manezhne Square was hashtagged as Revolution Olivier, because it was supposed to happen on 30th of December, before the New Year celebration, where most of the Russians are preparing the salads at home. And the government actually expected that people won't come to the square, they'll just stick to the celebration part, and this is actually what happened.
Maybe to answer your question furthermore, I can give okay, I'm not sure how it works.
If you just speak...
just speak and it works, okay. Let's do it. Let's take about the influence of the social networking. I don't think that, again, we have already said that social media is a tool which just makes our communication and our society a little bit different. But the main issues, for example, the sustainability issue, remain the same from the ancient Greece or medieval France. Let's take French Revolution in the 18th century, all right? People stormed the Bastille, yeah, they freed. Okay, that's a great idea. Now what we do? Let's kill all the aristocrats. Yeah, that's even better idea. Let's kill them all. Okay, we killed all the aristocrats. Let's have a republic. Yeah, that's good. And no. Let's get back to the kings, and so on and so on. So, but usually, if you want a sustainability change, you need a time to think it over with think tanks, with the intellectuals, with the youth, with the. And what we have, and I see here is a serious threat of social media advent, that the social media doesn't give you time to think. It's action to reaction. It's reaction to action at the same time. Let's go all to the square. Yeah, let's go. Because the speed that the social media operates is unprecedented. And that's why maybe for older generation it's really hard to adapt, because the speed is unbelievable. I mean, if you have the hubs like in ancient Greece, in Athens, where the orators stood in different parts of the city and they called the crowds to listen to them. So the same thing is on social media, but you can do it in a blink of an eye, and if it goes viral, your message can become international in a matter of seconds, and it's a very good thing. But also, as you said, it has a really strong issue with sustainability. How we go on with without thinking. If we run without thinking like headless chickens, at some point we're gonna fall down the abyss and have real trouble to getting out.
Well, older people has been mentioned here. Well, as I'm old now, my mother is 73. She became a Facebook user 1 year ago. First, I subscribed to her all the interesting social media profiles. And now she actually starts to troll some people. And I actually seen one. She's very interested in that. She's an avid reader and she basically watches less TV, listens a lot of radio, and uses Facebook. So she recently trolled one quite particularly known person, like with 2 watts, like this very cool trolling, like. Not interesting, something like that, and it was quite well received. But the thing is, with all the technologies, with all the technologies, I think that if to come back a little bit and see social networks as the way of to treat it as a newspaper, with all newspapers, the most interesting thing is the content. And there's a funny thing in Lithuania. In all the world states, there are 2 social networks: one for information and the second one for the pictures. So the one for information is Twitter, and people, all the elites are exchanging information on Twitter, and all the social activism mainly happens on Twitter. And the Facebook is in most countries is for pictures of friends, sometimes for social activism, but nothing like that. Latvia is one of the countries where all the elite uses Twitter, and and Facebook is silent. And my friend, he asked me, you have got like 100 commentaries after your post. I said, yes. I mean, what are you commenting on? we never have this type of thing. But the thing is that why the social media is rising and why this is doing that, because there are a certain amount of people who are creating the content for it. And if I am following the interesting people who are creating content for me, and if I am finding it intellectually amusing to read the post and see what they are doing, or to laugh at the jokes, or to see what kind of activism is there, I will follow that. If these people will immediately stop writing, probably I will spend much less time in social media, and that's also true, because it's not so interesting to read just these reposted things, which someone reposted article from Delphi or BBC or other place. So and this lies the opportunity for all of us. That means that if we can create a good content, bypassing the traditional schemes of printing the newspaper and delivering it out, that means that there is hope for us to reach Nigeria, to reach out with the social topics like Nigeria, to reach out, to raise awareness about complex issues, and also to demand a public change in some regimes where these regimes are there. Again, about the older forms of social media, I want a small remark. And it reminded me an article which I recently read about the forms of social media communication in Kontakte recently, after it became heavily censored. Is that people are starting to use the not directly saying that what is Putin huilo or something like that, not directly saying that, but using some very sophisticated forms of saying these things. They are saying the same thing by language which is understood only for a few, but they use some kind of coded language. And the same thing happened in Lithuania, in Lithuanian poetry during the Soviet rule. Where poets were writing poems where everybody understood what they are writing or what they are criticizing, and the media, the censors did not get that. For example, now we have a brilliant movie Leviathan by Russian director, which has now been nominated for Oscars, which was sponsored by the Ministry of Culture, and nobody of his censors understood that it's actually a movie about the current soul of Russia, because the art and the creativity sometimes finds other ways how to say the same thing without using these these aggressive words. So as the governments are becoming better at censoring social networks or influencing social networks in the way we want to be influencing them, people also are becoming better at delivering the messages through use of metaphors, through use of coded language and other things. But there's a problem that there are 3 million people, bit less than 3 million people in Lithuania, so that means that the social networks are not reaching everybody. I mean, even the biggest news portal Delphi, I think they got like 1.3 million clicks with about half of those being the ones who don't come to the political topics, half of ones who come for bigger penis, better breast, and and all these other nice stories which are out there. So we need to understand that the social topics are not for everybody. They are for a small minority, and we need to, as Milda said, we need to be very clearly aware that the TV, which reaches in Lithuania about 65%, 68% of people, is still the number one, and it will be for the far-seeing future. Is still the number one information there. So what if you want to change the world, and if you want to change some things, and if you want to do it through the comfort of your social network, you can do it by applying pressure. And applying pressure to the media, applying pressure to the journalist who has a much bigger audience, applying pressure to politicians who can do some things. And as they are, afraid of us, the 300,000 who are activists, they will do something. And these things sometimes disproportionately change the debate. For example, Andrus has an audience of how many people?
27,000.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and you have, but you have your TV audience is bigger.
It's still bigger, of course, but you don't get the reaction from the TV audience. You don't get the debate from the TV audience.
But influencing Andrus about Nigeria, can get you the TV audience as well. So here is the thing what you can do. So you can see it as a pie. There is an onion inside, and this onion is you and your friends, your small circle of group. There is a bigger onion which is the whole Facebook, like activists who follow the big profiles, and there is a larger onion which is the whole remaining media. And you need to find a creative ways how to target them with your content, with your message, what you want to say.
So we must be rounding up, as I see, and we are basically providing some advice and some conclusions about our discussion. Andrius Tapinas has been silent for a bit, so I would ask for his advice, as he is, I guess, the most powerful person among the panelists in the social network. So I'm very concerned about the democracy situation and the human rights in the region and in the world and in the region. I'm not naive that we'll be more prone to seek for the information about Nigeria, Palestine, Burma, or whatever. But I think that we should at least look after the situation in the neighboring countries. Ukraine is part of this story. We are very silent about what is happening in Azerbaijan, I guess partly for the political reasons, because there are economic interests, and Europe is very silent about the oppression in Azerbaijan. Also, I've said, 2015 elections in Belarus. So what could the audience of young people do, like expressing solidarity or spreading the message out that it is on our agenda, in our agenda, in the public attention. So, Andrus, your take on that?
Well, my take might be quite maybe unpopular in this kind of audience, but from the list of priorities that I would see for young people in my country, I would rank the situation in Azerbaijan really low on priorities. And I see that, like a young democracy, we are young and we are eager to do the world a better place. But a very famous economist and politicians have said that you start doing it by clearing up your backyard. And for example, my agenda and one of my crusades, let's say, on which are based the algorithm of my social media activities and TV activities and so on, is to try to make Lithuanian people to do what Mykolas said about critical thinking, about not accepting that media says without your own thinking, but trying to teach people to read between the lines, to get the ideas to get the critique between the lines. And it's actually really hard, because when you get something like really sophisticated message and you get like 80% of comments that I don't get it, or he's a stupid person, I don't really get it.
So then you invite Monika Šilčiūtė.
Yeah, something like that. So it goes step by step, and I think the idea is that I could also, when you start, you need to work on your skills either in social media or in traditional media or in doing communication yourself, to hone your skills, to target your skills at critical thinking, at understanding the Aesopian talk, and then when we are at that point, when we have a critical mass, then we can raise the issues, and the issues can be global, because when you start learn to think critically, you start to learn globally. And I think that at the current moment, the Lithuanian society are totally not ready to think globally and totally not ready to think critically. Unfortunately, that's why we have actually the government that we have. That's why we have the lack of initiative from the top that we have. And that's why we still live in the bubble, and we say, oh yeah, we are a very young country, we're a young democracy, only quarter of the century. But this is, I think, the issue of ourselves. We need to learn to think critically. We need to read more books and not only the news portals. And we need to understand the differences of opinions and the measure of opinions and the measure of critical thinking that also the Milda was saying. I think that's the main issue that we need to start from and then move on.
Thank you very much. I think we touched upon many diverse issues, as internet is diverse, as social networks are diverse, our opinions were also quite diverse. We touched upon that ignorance still exists. We still have some bubbles or some illusions spreading around the social networks. We shouldn't be underestimating nor overestimating the power of the social networks. We also touched upon that the authorities are learning and they are monitoring, they are limiting, they are filtering, censoring the internet, so the risks do exist and we should be aware of that. But the youth should know that the social media creates opportunities. We can do protests, boycotts, crowdfunding, informing, reporting, do solidarity actions, many opportunities. So, but as many of the panelists said, there are certain rules and we need to be technologically savvy, how to do it, how to communicate properly. So we are living in the very interesting world. I wouldn't say brand new world. The conference in Davos already said that there's an internet of everything. But on the other hand, there were already people saying that the internet, as we know, would vanish. And therefore, I think that we'll be seeing a more challenging world, but definitely more interesting world. Thank you for the discussion, and I think all the panelists, they need a big applause. Thank you for coming to this interesting